Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of Macmillan University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home, comes a special bulletin from Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Elizabeth.
Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. Never before had a radio broadcast provoked such outrage or such chaos. Upwards of 1 million people convinced, if only briefly, that the United States was being laid waste by alien invaders, and a nation left to wonder how they possibly could have been so gullible. By 8:15 Eastern Time, telephones were ringing madly all across the country as concerned Americans tried to determine the whereabouts of relatives, warn friends and acquaintances, and most of all, corroborate what they were hearing.
A what? Wait a minute.
For the next several hours, newspapers, radio stations, and police precincts from coast to coast
Ma'am, we don't know anything
would be
about
swamped with calls.
Well, I can't help that, ma'am. We just don't know anything about it. Well, did I say something about a quiet Sunday evening? What's going on?
Soon, strange bulletins began coming in over the press service wires. In Bergenfield, New Jersey, just north of Grover's Mill, some 20 families turned up at a police station with all of their household possessions piled into their cars. In Indianapolis, a woman rushed the pulpit in a Methodist church, shouting that the end of the world had come. And in Washington State, a spectacularly ill-timed power failure plunged the small town of Concrete into darkness and sent terrified residents fleeing into the mountains.
The battle which took place tonight at Grover Mills has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by an army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against the single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. 120 known survivors. Here's a special bullet from New York.
Well, my wife, she came in, my wife just wringing her hands and wailing away, her eyeballs about to pop out onto her lap, going, "What is it? What is it? What could it be? Is it the Germans?" Well, she hadn't heard the word Martians, but I had.
There's a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Carl Phillips has been identified in a Trenton hospital. Now here's another bulletin from
We think that we're really smart, but if there's a cue out there that could possibly be dangerous, we're going to react to it protectively, autonomically, instinctively, fear first, and reason and facts second.
All right. So what can you guess what we're talking about today?
Well, we're talking about aliens. But
yeah, at the aliens, but kind of the coup de grace of the alien conspiracy theories.
Yeah, this is
as to what exactly might be going on.
Like I was telling you, this is like wearing a tinfoil hat on your tinfoil hat.
So what we just watched there, well, first of all, welcome to the Conspiracy Dad podcast. My name is Dante.
Dave.
I'm going to start letting you introduce yourself.
Thanks. I think it's great when you do it. Yeah.
I just like, maybe we could switch it up and you do the intros, I do the intros.
I
I don't like to steal the show, even though I am the lead singer.
One of my favorite podcasts to listen to is ruined every time when the host has the other members announce, like they do their hello, their sign on, and all momentum. 3 of them. Yeah, it just kills it. So you do a great job every time.
All right. Well,
I don't mind taking the ball every once in a while, but yeah, listening to somebody do their sign on. What's up, people? Like it's never good.
Well, it's good to have everyone here with us. This is the Conspiracy Dad podcast. We are happy to have you listening or watching, and we are talking about how to fake an alien invasion.
We talked about faking a moon landing.
I forgot to hit the switcher again. They've just been looking at my pretty face, but they'll see you in a minute. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's appropriate, I suppose, since we've been talking about faking a moon landing for the last few episodes. Now we can talk about us faking somebody else visiting us.
Yes.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I'm going to unplug that real quick. Hold on a second. I'm going to have to edit this out. Okay, now we're back in business. Sorry about that, world. I had a bit of a exciting day, and I texted you earlier today. And this could be like a podcast. It's another podcast of its own that we'll get to. But I had an encounter with a Masonic temple, and I'm not very knowledgeable of Masonry, Freemasonry, or I'm a Catholic, and we've always just been told to stay far, far away from the Masons.
Yeah, the little bit of cramming I did about the Freemasons, that's one of the first things that comes up is like Catholics and Masons, they don't get along.
Seriously, I mean, growing up, that's what I've always been taught is you don't want to have anything to do with the Masons. You pray for them, but don't.
The Cliff Notes, if you just Google it, are basically like the Freemasons originated out of a group of Masons, like stone bricklayers.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there wasn't room in the cathedral, and this group of bricklayers decided they were going to like get their own little chapter of a cathedral, like a kind of a branch off. We'll do a startup of our own. And so, of course, the Catholic Church was like, whoa, we don't do startups.
Yeah.
You guys are under our umbrella. And so that was kind of the genesis of the Freemasons. Growing up in a Protestant household, I'll tell you, we were also told to stay away from them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it wasn't one of those like...
But they are Protestant. I know they have to be Protestant because you can't be Catholic and a Mason. Like the Catholics won't take you.
Yes, right.
Which is funny because I had a buddy growing up who his dad was a Freemason. He's Catholic.
Oh.
And it's like he always kept it quiet. Like he just married into the family.
Okay.
I don't think he ever converted to Catholicism, but they definitely didn't. Didn't like to tell the world that he was a Freemason.
I don't know that I'm aware of. I don't know any Freemasons. I think I've had a few conversations with them, and they are always pretty ambiguous about what goes on in there. And
I know why. I got a pretty good idea of why they don't talk about what goes on in those temples. So I was at a certain, I don't want to mention names because they're kind of clients of mine, so I don't want to create some sort of...
there are a lot of them out there, and I'm sure that the one you went to is not the only one with this feature.
No, but I don't want to create scandal for somebody that's just trying to run a business. But I was at a place where they've turned a old Masonic temple into a business. And I was talking to the superintendent who had finished this project, and we were talking about conspiracy stuff, and he just he said something about like, oh yeah, and this place has some pretty odd, we saw some weird stuff in here, and this is over 100-year-old building, and so he said that in the process of remodeling, he said we found a blood trough built into the third floor.
Say it again.
It was a blood trough built into the third floor flooring under a secret door. And I was immediately like, I need to go see that. And he's like, let's go. So I took my camera, I took a video of it, and we went up there, and it's pretty strange. I mean, he said the plumbers wouldn't even touch it. They didn't want to have anything to do with it.
If a plumber won't touch it.
Yeah, no kidding. The thing is, it is a blood trough. Like, it's not just a bucket or in the third floor. He said when they were working on it, there was like a foot of pigeon poop in there. Like, it had been like not inhabited for a long time. So once they got all the trash out, and there were meth heads living in there or whatever, they get to the bottom of the floor, and he notices that he sees a seam on the floor, but there's no handle. It's just like a seam on the floor. Dog, every time we podcast, she's got to come in here. Go lay down.
Worst.
Go. You're good. Yeah, I know. I'm not going to help you though.
The dog's getting a little freak. This is like
She
kind
knows
of a
that we're
movie.
talking.
Yeah, she's Freemasons. I don't
He's talking about evil spirits are coming.
Yeah.
So anyway, he sees this line on the floor and he gets his knife out and he's like, prise it up or whatever. I don't know. We keep losing our signal for some reason. There's this door, a hidden door that pulls up, and there's a 6 by 2 foot blood trough like you would use in a butcher, for butchering animals, and it's built into the floor. And you can see, he takes me to the second floor where I can see the piping of it coming out, and it comes out and it's angled so that gravity, works.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes all the way across. And he was just like, it goes into the brick and we don't know where that goes. Like he was telling me that's not, it's not, we keep losing you. I don't know why. It's not electrical. It's not gas. It's not plumbing. It's a blood pipe.
It's blood plumbing. Yeah.
And it just went into the brick wall and into the dirt. And like down, he's like, I don't know, is there another building underneath there that we don't know about?
Oh my goodness.
So that was pretty wild. And then I started Googling Masonic blood troughs.
Yeah, I did a little bit of Googling. Didn't find much, but anytime I've spoke with people, that are related to the Freemasons anyway, or if they've been a member or whatever, they're pretty vague about what goes on there. And my thought is kind of like, if there were nothing to hide, you'd go, yeah.
I think that's their whole thing, though. It's
Yeah.
like it's all about secrets. Like that's the
some people I've talked to have been pretty coy. What goes on? Oh, we just and they kind of grin a little bit. Nothing, man.
If you look into, I think we're gonna have to manually do this every time it keeps throwing you off. Anyway, if you start looking into some of and I've only had a cursory glance at Masonic initiations. I don't claim to know everything about it, but just at a glance, it's pretty weird. There's some pretty weird stuff going on. So that was my afternoon.
If you're a Mason and you take exception to this, we'd love to hear from you.
Come on, I'd love to hear why
so
you have
far,
a blood
I've
trough.
never heard a really transparent Mason.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anybody that's like an active Mason. I've never.
No,
I might
kind of
know
an
them, and they
old
just
school
never
thing,
talk about it. But that is interesting. That the place that we were at is like, it's a big 4-story with the basement, 4-story building. It's the most significant structure in the town. It's so you look at it and you think for a small town, it was a big part of the community for whatever reason. And I think that was true across the country. Like there's Masonic temples and lodges all over the country. And
I've been to one, they've got a couple that are music venues now. So I've been to one in Wichita and one in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And again, they're not active Masons temples, but the buildings, the architecture's pretty interesting. And you're right. They're standout buildings in what I've been in like smaller downtown areas. And the impression that I get is like in those smaller communities back in like the early 1900s, that was like your business owners, like the Chamber of Commerce type folks would be involved in something like that, filling the blood troughs.
Yeah, it kind of seems all normal until you think about the blood trough that was built in over 100 years ago. The thing is, it was part of the building.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you look at a Catholic school, I would think about, but it's the same similar kind of building, classrooms and stuff. It's like, well, it's being used, kind of know what it's being used for.
Right.
It's like, well, this is a classroom. And even if they had a chapel, you go, here's a chapel. I don't even know I was just kept looking around the building going, what on earth would they be using this for?
Well, it just struck me if it was like something on the up and up. Yeah, no, we do have a blood trough. We have cookouts here and we use this to like small town, a lot of people hunting game. We use this to break down our meat, but you would do that on the first floor.
Yeah.
If it were
you do that in the kitchen.
Yeah. Like you wouldn't lug an 8-point buck all the way up the stairs, butcher, break it down upstairs, and then you might only put a blood trough way up top if you didn't really want people to know what was going on.
Well, I think by putting it and a hidden trap door, you're kind of showing
Also,
your hand
yes.
as far as this is not something we
What's
want
in your
people to know
pocket?
about.
Nothing?
Nothing. So anyway, we don't want to get. We'll podcast about that later. It's just an interesting thing that happened today, and I think there's a lot for us to learn about maybe what was going on back
That
in the
one
day.
is funny because, you know,
And the locals were terrified of it. Like I talked to there's girls working
Yeah.
there. I was like, hey, do you know about the,
Yeah.
she's like, I'm not going
Bad
up there.
juju,
Like
yeah.
they're like, there were people in the town that they were like, I'm not setting foot in that building. There's no way.
a lot of the stuff we get into here is one of those, like I was telling you, I told a friend of mine this weekend, we talked about the moon landing being staged, and she was kind of like, what? I'd never heard of that. But I feel like if I brought up Masons being suspicious, people would just go, yeah, real weird.
I wonder what Protestants are okay with them, because you're Baptist, is that right?
Yeah, I grew up in a Baptist church.
That's
yeah.
a lot of Oklahoma, mostly
Yeah,
Baptist.
right,
So
yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Do you think there
were
are some
like,
Baptists
I
that
would
are
think
okay with
so.
it for some reason?
Yeah, or definitely like you said, I don't know any active Masons that I'm aware of. It seems like something that up till the 60s possibly, that was just like if you were a dude in the community and you had a business, you might be invited to get involved in something like that. It's kind of a fraternal
It is a
part
fraternity.
of the community, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably where I came across. I would imagine there's probably crossover. You could be a Baptist and a Mason.
Well, and I
Don't
wonder
know for sure, but it's certainly not like you said. Like there wasn't like this stigma of like you can't be both.
in the Baptist church.
Right, yeah,
So
sorry.
you could be a Baptist.
As far as I
and-
know, yeah. But it definitely wasn't like what you were talking about, like raised in the Catholic Church, and
Yeah, I think even
it was like explicit. You cannot be a Freemason.
popes have made like statements about it and
Yeah.
saying like you cannot be
Yeah.
this and that. I'm trying to get our switcher to work. I don't know what's going on today. It's because we're talking about the Masons.
That's right,
And I was
yeah.
around some bad, who knows what. So yes, we'll talk about Masons some other fun day.
Sounds
but
good, yeah.
today we're talking about something that on the surface seems pretty outlandish, like pretty hard to believe somebody would do something like this, but it's the idea of whether it's the United States government or world governments, would somebody attempt to fake an alien invasion, and why they might do that?
Yeah.
And so, obviously, the clip you just saw a bit ago was War of the Worlds, Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, which was a radio broadcast that terrified millions of Americans. It was a fictional, if you don't know the story, a fictional account of Martians landing and attacking the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And people, through this new medium of radio, they just didn't suspect.
No, they did not see that
They
coming.
didn't see it
Yeah.
coming. It actually caused a lot of problems. We're still having trouble with our video. So that's great. But anyway, so what's your take on Orson Welles?
Just like a lot of things, I think you put a piece of content out there and don't expect any particular kind of reaction. I just was reading an article about him going out after the show was broadcast and being really surprised that in Times Square there was a big headline up that he had caused a panic. And he was kind of like, oh, it was supposed to just be like funny, but whoops, sorry guys.
Yeah, but we're kind of following. Well, if you want to get to the bottom of this, the best podcast I've seen on it is James Corbett's.
Mm-hmm.
He did an episode called "How to Fake an Alien Invasion," and we're just going to talk about some of his points that he made. And what I think is really fascinating about Corbett's take on it is that he did it back in 2015, and so it seems like a lifetime ago. But if you think back to in the UFO world, things really started to heat up in 2016. In 2016, and this was for me the moment when I was I went to family dinners and was like, is anybody else paying attention to what's going on here? And the New York Times published a piece about the Pentagon releasing several videos about UFO encounters with footage of these alleged UFOs. And it's coming from the Pentagon and the New York Times. And it was the first time for me, it was different than, say, the traditional accounts, because this is coming from the government.
Yeah, right.
It's not, or at least actors within the government. It's not coming from some guy on a farm or, some guy. And
Well,
I
you said
remember
it's-
saying that to people at dinner, and
Yeah.
even it just blew my mind that people didn't care.
Mhm.
They didn't seem to notice. They didn't seem to care. It was just like, oh, that's interesting. And I just kept thinking, am I reading this wrong? I mean, even you and I had a conversation.
Yeah.
I think you said something like, my reaction seems like the way that you should
Yeah.
react,
Yeah,
but for
I
some
remember
reason
that,
you
yeah.
were like, I don't
I don't know why.
I don't know why I don't
yeah.
care.
Yeah.
But so if you go back to 2015, it was pretty different. And it was like the idea of, Corbett's tune, I think, is pretty accurate, is that most people thought it was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
The idea that, even UFO sightings, they thought was pretty ridiculous. It has definitely become mainstream. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this episode, because I think it's happening right now, quite possibly.
It's become so mainstream that when you hear Rogan talk about it, he's like past it. Like he went from being really interested in UFOs and having like Fravor the pilot on, and then like now every once in a while I hear him touch on that subject, and he's like, I think I just want to believe it too bad. And like he's kind of like past the point of like an enthusiastic UFO believer to like he went to the next evolution.
Yeah, I probably follow this at like an unhealthy level. So sorry if that if anybody thinks I'm strange, but his response is very, like, if I could ask him some questions, it would be pretty direct, because the guy that was at the heart of a lot of this when it came out was Tom DeLonge, the singer for Blink 182. And I'm not even a Blink 182 fan necessarily, but I had heard him mention things about this, but he was a part of, so shortly after the New York Times article, he collaborates with his academy, the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, and does a public YouTube, presentation about it with a big, huge stage. And everybody on his board of directors is deep state, CIA, military intelligence. Like they're legitimate people. They're not yahoos. They're not rock stars. They're I don't know, CIA. And so that was, to me, just odd. But then he went on Rogan, and if you go back and watch that, it's very strange because Rogan laughed him out of the room.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he made fun of him.
I never listened to that episode.
You should go listen to it in light of where we are now, because Rogan's tune in 2016 was, "This is absurd. Tom DeLonge, you're crazy. You've lost your mind."
And what was Tom DeLonge saying at that time? Like,
he's saying some pretty outlandish stuff.
Okay.
I mean, it was a lot of like, I can't tell you how I know what I know. I have sources, but it's that, there's been contact that, and our military has known about it for a long time, and that he's helping advise these generals and these people to how to roll out disclosure, or how to, I don't know if it's roll out disclosure. It's like how to bring the public in on this conversation.
Yeah.
So he started that academy, which was a public company. And so as soon as he went public, I bought shares in it right away. I told my wife, I'm like, I'm sorry. I know I'm never going to see a profit off this, but if they do make a UFO, I want in on that, And so I bought, I think I got like 20 shares of so I co-own Angels and Airwaves and Blink 182, which all operates under, I think, the budget of To the Stars of his company. And he calls me every January with a shareholders update.
Oh, well, good.
I get a phone call, and it's Tom DeLonge, and he's talking to everybody, but we can submit questions through a texting app, and he just updates us on where the company is. But man, I'll tell you, the first shareholders call that I had from Tom, my thought was immediately, oh, he's not who he pretends to be when he's in front of a crowd. In the way that he got on the call, and he is a savvy CEO. Like he knows how to run a company. He knows how to run a meeting. He's very business minded, but he's also, when he's on stage, he's making like goofy jokes and like he's so immature and ridiculous. But there's another side to him that is all business and very serious.
Well, a couple thoughts on that are not alien related. Just I was almost dismissive when you go, Tom, Blink-182. I'm like, yeah, stupid band. And then I thought, well, if I were to be like on record for some of the stage performances I gave at the same time Blink-182 was at, like, I'm not the same dude either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and you also, like, whether your band is based like on like silly teenage adolescent fart jokes or whatever, you don't get to that level of success without being a fairly serious person.
No,
right?
no, definitely.
So to dismiss him as just like a silly rock star is one way to do it, but also give the guy his due is like, well, he's a successful artist. He's reached a point in his career in music that most people never get to. And also he's pretty far removed from, like, a guy that we saw on MTV 25 years ago, I guess.
Well,
is the point.
and so the point I was making about Rogan was, Tom went on that show and he is like, he had never heard of Bob Lazar.
Rogan not,
or he hadn't met him or talked to him yet. And he brought it up, like, and Tom's like, yeah, I'm publishing his memoir or whatever. Like, he's like, that's the hang up I have with Joe is you laughed Tom out of the room.
Yeah.
And kind of dismissed him completely. And then really like a month or two later,
then he's at the forefront.
Bob Lazar on, and his tune shifted 100%.
Yeah.
Like he said multiple times that he believes Bob's story.
Right.
But you can't have it both ways. You can't laugh Tom out and say, "Oh, I believe Bob," because Tom believes Bob too.
That's funny because I can't tell you how many times I've heard Rogan talk to guests and go, "Have you heard Bob Lazar's story? Have you heard it?" Like, yeah, he's very on board with Lazar.
I would love to hear, and that's another weird thing is that neither Tom nor Joe really talk about that podcast. Like, people ask them all the time about like, well, what happened or what's the fallout? And they both seem to have like gone, hey, let's just not talk about this. It was a bad podcast for Tom DeLonge. He looked crazy and he was dismissed and Joe was kind of making fun of him to his face. And
what are you going to do?
Tom has talked about it a little bit. He said that, I kind of jumped the gun and I talked about some things that I shouldn't have talked about.
Yeah.
Not worried about Joe Rogan, but about his people that he's working with. And I think he is honestly, Tom is, whether or not you believe him, he is a true believer.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that he believes a lot of the stuff that he believes about UFOs and what's going on. He believes that he's part of a really important government program to bring this to the consciousness of the public.
Mm-hmm.
It is happening. I mean, if you look at the data on searches for UFOs and presidents are talking about it. Serious congressmen, senators are talking about it.
We have a space force.
We have a space force. It's become part of, since 1947, UFOs have always been part of our culture. But I would say since 2016, it has definitely gone mainstream. And it's part of, that's not to say that everybody believes in UFOs, but a large number of people have seen UFOs.
I know we talk about Kokomo quite a bit from time to time on this episode, and just anecdotally, he's mentioned, like, as a pilot, the culture has kind of shifted of
dramatically.
Like, he says pilots you never told other pilots if you saw lights in the sky while you were flying, because that was kind of like you would be a bit of an outcast just socially. And now it's one of those.
Every month I'm getting a phone call from Kokomo going, you won't believe what we saw.
You're talking to other pilot buddies or tapping your co-pilot on the shoulder going, you see that over there? The stigma's not the same that it was in the pilot community from what I understand. So yeah, it's a lot more widely accepted.
So yeah, that's the climate of UFO conversations has changed a lot really quickly. And, I mean, I guess I'll tell my personal story. Like somebody asked me the other day, what, why did I get so interested in UFOs and all of this? And I said, honestly, because I saw one. I used to think it was stupid. I thought I really did. I mean, years ago, I was on a podcast and we were going around like, what's your favorite conspiracy theory? And one of my buddies was from Roswell. His family was, and he was like, he said that. He's like, oh, Roswell, 1947. And I really looked at him like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I thought, that is so stupid. Like, you really believe that there was an alien crash? And he just was like, oh, yeah, if you start looking into it, it's weird. And so I did. And for a certain amount of years, I just thought, well, that's very interesting because there is something there. There's a lot of people that claim to have seen UFOs. There's a lot of stories that you can clearly tell they're bullshit. There's others that you go, well, that's a pretty legitimate source.
Yeah.
I mean, presidents, colonels, generals, pretty high-ranking military people that are saying things like, NASA astronauts saying they saw something funny. And so if it's, I took a trip from, for probably 4 or 5 years, I thought it was strange, but I didn't take it all too seriously until 2020 when I actually saw a UFO. And it was a pretty weird experience. I mean, I guess my opinion to that point was, this is Black Ops. It's something, it's us. It's not the idea that it was aliens or something. I just didn't think that was very likely. It's definitely highly, highly more likely that we just have advanced aerial craft that obviously we don't know about because it's secret and they don't, they don't tell us about it. And that's kind of where I was at with it for a long time until 2020. And the reason I say that my opinion about it changed was because of the context of when and where it happened. And so I had a few friends who had told me that they had seen UFOs, both some long ago, some close encounters. Like I had a friend who saw, like he said, yeah, it was about 100 yards away and it was a flying saucer with lights on it. And I just thought that's ridiculous. And so I was standing out in front of my house with my neighbor and we were smoking cigars. And that's when that was the context was we were talking about UFOs and I literally said something like, man, I wish I could see a UFO. How come all these other people have seen UFOs and I haven't? And right at that moment, I looked up in the sky and I saw something. I still don't know what I saw. What I initially saw was what looked like two bright stars that were about an inch apart, very prominent in the sky. And I was just thinking, like, what constellation is that? Like, as my buddy's talking to me, I'm just kind of like thinking, what? I don't know if I recognize that. And I watched it for about 20 seconds and they just blinked off. It was like watching a light bulb that just turn off.
Yeah.
They didn't fade off. They didn't move. They're completely stationary. It's like watching two stars just turn off. And it was really discombobulating. I was like, am I seeing things? Like, what, what's going on? So long story short, a few nights later, I went on my back porch and I thought, I'm going to go out there and see if I can see this again. And I go out on my back porch and I don't see anything for like 10, 15 minutes. I know it's in the sky. There's Jupiter, there's Saturn. I know it's there. And then my newborn son is crying. So I step inside for like 30 seconds and I step back out on the porch and I just about fell over because it was like right dead center, right where I was looking in the middle of the sky.
Yeah.
There's a really, really bright star that was not there a second ago. And I'm just thinking, well, I know it wasn't there. But then as I watched it for about 30 seconds and then it started to spiral and then it goes and like shoots off really, really fast all the way across the horizon. And so I don't know what it was. I don't know but it did seem odd to me that it was what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And so I described it to my wife as like, it would be like as if you and I were saying, you said, I've never seen a hot air balloon. That'd be cool to see a hot air balloon. And then you looked up and you're like, I'll be damned, there's a hot air balloon right there. Yeah. And then 2 days later, you thought to yourself, that's pretty cool when I saw that hot air balloon. I wonder if I go outside right now, there'll be another one. And then it's like, I'll be damned, there's another hot air balloon right there in the middle of the sky. And could it be aliens? I don't know. either way, it's the timing of it's pretty strange. I mean, I don't know what you think.
That's more in line with the simulation hypothesis almost.
Well, it is. I mean,
Right.
I really did have a feeling of like, is somebody watching me? Like, this is really, I felt a little weirded out for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen 2 others since then. I don't want to tell those stories, but I've never seen anything like green men in a I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Mine are just like things in the sky that it's not an airplane. It's not a satellite. It's something else. And it's also moving in a way that's not, I don't know what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and it's, for me, it's just been lights. I think I saw a TR-3B once. I don't know if you know what that is.
No.
You can look it up, but it's a triangle shaped UFO that's very common that people see. I saw the same thing, just a perfect triangle of stars, and then it started to spin, and then it just disappeared. But that one people think might be military craft. It's just top secret.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can look up blogs and stuff on it. But so anyway, that's just to say, even if you're not into the UFO world, even just in the past 5 to 10 years, this has really turned up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And all the way up to, presidents talking about it, which I have a clip of that. If you want to do a clip, do we want to listen to the presidents talking about UFOs? I got to add it real quick. Hold on a second. But this isn't all of them. I know Obama's talked about UFOs. I know that Jimmy Carter saw a UFO. I'm sure there's another one I'm not thinking of, but here's a couple fine gentlemen talking about UAP. That's what they call them now.
Yeah.
They don't. That's another weird thing. Like, why did they do that? Why did they start calling them UAP? You know what I mean?
Yeah, my guess would be to get away from
the stigma.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here's a couple presidents talking about it.
We need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
If you saw that there were aliens there, would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would?
Well, I think, look, what do we know? We know now we live in an ever-expanding universe. We know that there are billions of stars and planets literally out there, and the universe is getting bigger. We know from our fancy telescopes that just in the last 2 years, more than 20 planets have been identified outside our solar system that seem to be far enough away from their suns and dense enough that they might be able to support some form of life. So it makes it increasingly less likely that we're alone.
Oh, you're trying to give me a hint that there are aliens.
No, I'm trying to tell you I don't know.
Oh.
But if we were visited someday, I wouldn't be surprised. I just hope that it's not like Independence Day.
Yeah, right.
That it's a conflict.
Well, now we have friendly
Maybe the only way to unite this incredibly divided world of ours. They're out there. We better think of how all the differences among people on Earth would seem small if we felt threatened by a space invader. That's the whole theory of independence.
You're right.
Everybody gets together and makes nice and, you know.
You and Bill O'Reilly would be hiding in a bunker together.
Oh, Bill O'Reilly, he every mean thing he ever said about me. I don't care. Look at that.
All right. Well,
say what you will about Bill Clinton. He is really good on talk shows.
Oh, yeah.
And that's been a strong suit of his from way back.
He's a likable guy until he's not.
I'm saying that so I can stay off of his list.
Yeah, you don't want to be on his list. That's what I mean. Until you get Vince Foster. He's all I think Hillary calls those shots. I don't know.
Well, like you said, it's almost like they're from a script they're working off of.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
that's the point. And they gave multiple speeches like that. Like you can find both Bill and Reagan and I believe a couple others, but saying basically the same thing. Like, I often imagine how quickly all of our differences would be set aside if we just, knew that there was an alien threat that would...
I would have said that before COVID, but I mean, I'm not the first one to have this thought, but you'd think a pandemic on that scale and a global crisis would have got everybody on the same page. But in a lot of ways, it seemed like all that did was Like there are people that are against the vaccination just because the other side is for it, and vice versa.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So now I'm wondering, like, well, okay, if there is this narrative that the powers that be want to run of let's fake an alien invasion so we can get people on board with more of a global economic push or something like that. I wonder if they're questioning it right now, going, God, it didn't work.
Well, I think there's some people that think that's kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
And they look at it as like, this was a beta test to
Yeah.
kind of see, well, how, if there's a threat, how are people, and I think that's the point of his podcast about going all the back to War of the Worlds and the Rockefellers' involvement with that and CBS. And they don't realize that, like, simultaneously when that broadcast was going on, they were studying how the population would respond to something like that. And there was a lot of data being collected. And I'm sure that there's been other things happening over time. I mean, never let a crisis go to waste, and it's like they probably study a lot of these things and they're gauging. I had a buddy the other day, I don't think he listens to podcasts, but I'm not going to name his name, but he kind of started going down the flat earth thing. He's asking me about flat earth. And I was like, dude, it's a distraction. Like, I know I'm the guy who saw UFOs, but I'm telling you, the earth is not flat. It's a bridge too far, man. We just you can't do that. And, I was trying to explain to him that I think that, so you could look into that whole theory too. There is a massive amount of people on the internet that think the earth is flat.
Yeah.
And you could ask a question, well, how exactly did that happen? Like, what's going on? And I've heard other people talk about this, even a CIA guy that was saying, oh yeah, that was a psyop. Like, we were like, we're just seeing what kind of crazy thing we can make people believe. And I think there's a lot of things like that going on to understand the mass psychology of, manipulation or even hypnosis, There's a book written about that. Like The Madness of Crowds, I think is what it's called. What's the name of it?
I don't know what the book is called, but I'm just thinking back to things like Third Reich, ordinary men type stuff where it's, people get whipped up into a further, or like, the My Lai massacre, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people get in a crowd, a faceless crowd, and things get crazy, is my point.
Pretty quickly.
Back to your flat earther buddy, I was just picturing, like, what a weird turn of events for him. You get him into conspiracies, you pull the rug right out from under.
I know. I tried. I'm like pulling back in. Even today, I saw him and I was like, just go to Freemasonry. Just find something else. But flat Earth, trust me, it's a psyop. The CIA probably set it up just so they could test what kind of crazy nonsense they could get the world to believe. I had a friend who's a teacher in Pennsylvania, and she had a couple come in. She's like teaching third grade in a parent-teacher conference. They were yelling at her like mad. How could you be teaching this propaganda to our child? And they were serious flat earthers. They were like, the earth is not round. We know what you're up to. You're part of this. And she was just, and she was the first time she'd ever encountered it. She was just blown away because she started the conversation with like, have you heard about, there's some people think the earth is flat? And I was like, yeah, I've heard. And she's like, I can't believe they believe it.
Thing,
they really believe it. And I don't know. I've never been to space. Maybe it is flat, but I've seen a lot of footage. That makes me think it's at least, maybe it's not a perfect sphere, but it's definitely not flat.
It's a little bit like what we were talking about off the air, is like some of these ideas get introduced by people that make a lot of sense when they're talking about something else.
Yeah.
So then the waters get really murky on what you're going to buy into and what you're going to give some credence to. But this one here, War of the Worlds, and then, Rockefeller starts funding a lot of research into psychological warfare and how do the masses respond when you start.
And Rockefeller, or was it Nelson Rockefeller?
Originally, it's Nelson Rockefeller.
And then the family kept it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Lawrence Rockefeller pops up in the 90s kind of as a resurgence.
And he collaborates with Bill Clinton to research, and they're diving deep on, Rockefeller is just wanting, I mean, who knows what that guy knows? He's probably a Mason, but The idea is like he was meeting with Clinton. They were talking about opening up the Roswell file, and who knows how deep that goes. I mean, I've heard a lot of different takes on it, but I just think in general that take is, well, if we had to just unite everybody, if it's looking like World War III, maybe if we faked an alien. So if you just play that out mentally and think, well, would they do that? That seems pretty outlandish pretty extreme that you would fake an alien invasion, but they shot the president in the head. So, I mean,
I'm not a truther, but, the idea of like, well, they got the TSA in place. I'm like, well, that is something that happened, and we're not going back to the time before that existed.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are things that I think happened or were put in place as a result of COVID, and I can't think of anything specifically, but that we're not going back to a pre-COVID world.
Yeah.
Right. And so if something like a fake alien invasion gets put out there, then I don't remember, you said it just recently, like just shortly ago, but it was, well, even if it, comes to fruition and we go, whew, well, we dodged a bullet there, but good news is no aliens, but at least we all band together. There are going to be some things that were put into place that we don't walk back a few yards.
Yeah,
right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, my calculation was, before I saw a UFO personally, I mean, it's just everything's coming through a screen. I don't know what's real and what, I do video.
Sure.
I know how fake things can be. And my calculation was just the likelihood. Well, in my opinion, I was like, I'd never seen, as far as I know, nothing like a UFO has ever happened. I think it's baloney. So if you're thinking, what's the likelihood, but is it likely that somebody visited from another planet versus world leaders who are known to lie about everything decide to use all of our money to fake an alien invasion? Well, it's definitely way, way, way more likely that they would fake an alien invasion than there actually would be an alien invasion.
Yeah, it would be great for the world leaders for the alien invasion to happen the way they want it to. I have one thing that crosses my mind almost every time I hear people talk about UFOs is, like I'm like you were, I've never seen a UFO that I know of. I'm not all that interested in them, but mostly the reason I'm not as interested is everybody kind of seems excited about seeing them. Oh, I want to see one. And I'm like, yeah, careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
The best analogy I've heard recently is that kind of, we're like an anthole or an anthill on the side of a 6-lane highway. I mean, they may just be coming through here spraying us like pest control and moving on to the next thing.
That's what Michio Kaku talks about that. He's people think they want to meet aliens, and he's
I
like,
don't know that we do. Yeah.
I do have an idea about that though, because I have if they're visiting here, so why wouldn't they be visiting here? I mean, the only explanation would be just technologically they don't have what it takes. But I always thought there's actually this thing called it's like the 100th monkey phenomenon or something like that.
Okay.
And it has to do with, there was a series of islands, I think, off the coast of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been a different country, but it's not important. But they were isolated with these different groups of monkeys on them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were studying these monkeys, and there was a certain like fruit or like food on the island that the point was somehow on one of the islands, a monkey started to figure out how to use a stick as a tool to eat the food.
Yeah.
And on all these other islands where they weren't connected, they all pretty much started figuring it out at about the same time. And it's this idea that like evolution, as it progresses, there's kind of this uniform nature to when it's not like totally, I mean, obviously people separated by continents, there was huge gaps between what was happening in North America and Europe. And a lot of that had to do with just the circumstances of the climates and like the, availability of food and trade and all those things played into it. But there is a thing where it's like, well, if we were in an expanding universe that's coming from a common central point, I've always thought like, well, it probably makes sense that we might be as advanced as anybody gets at this point, and maybe there's people out there on other planets, but they're basically where we are right now, and they don't have the ability to fly light years.
I like that idea. That's something that you never hear anybody bring up is, we always jump to they're eons ahead of us, But yeah, I was listening to a competitive fighter the other day talking about, going into a match. He says, well, it's, he's just a guy across the mat from you. He's just another dude. And you're like, okay, yeah, in the universe, it is conceivable that there's a whole nother civilization that's just right about in the same spot as us. They're faking moon landings over there. I mean, but maybe they're just a little bit further ahead. But that to me is almost just as scary, because if we have the capability to go to another planet, I think our track record shows that we would go and we would want to colonize there, right? So I don't feel like we would land and try and make friends. We would want to go over there and stage a coup.
I think we're a little bit better about that now, but historically as humans, as species, we've not been good at that at all.
Yeah, and I don't mean we Americans. I mean we, Genghis Khan and the like. I mean we.
Well, so Michio is right in his point about if they're advanced enough to travel across the universe to visit us, they're advanced enough to kill us if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be a fair fight. It's not going to be Independence Day.
They're like Vikings.
It's going to be game over humans.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly, unless we have reached a point where we're technologically advanced to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And when we encounter new species, we actually are very mindful of them now. And we don't kill them. That we had to get past the 20th century to get to that point. But right now, back to my point about Tusco, when Jolly West killed Tusco in Oklahoma City, if you did that today, you'd be shot in the middle of the street.
Backlash,
There's no way. But you think about that, that is a change in our
point. Yeah, I mean,
consciousness and our perception of, we want gorillas to survive. We don't want to kill them. Yeah, there's poachers, but that's not the mainstream.
No, but you're right. I mean, we, as far as biological research goes, we tag animals to follow and see what they're up to, but there is a lot of care taken into, we're trying to take care of the environment to a large degree. So hopefully if, alien life form comes over here, then they're evolved enough to where they don't just squash us like bugs. Maybe they just tag our ears and
I think they have been tagging our ears. Who knows?
Yeah. They've been tagging somewhere.
If you get into the ufology world and, the stories are all over the place. I've had the chance to talk with people that have been involved in various UFO stories throughout, our, last, 50 years or whatever. And obviously, communicating with Betty's niece. And,
well, I was thinking of Barney Hill, where his account was kind of it kind of seemed like they were just checking me out, and they were, or like Travis Walton, is that the guy's name? Yeah. Both of them kind of talk about it like if you found a bird in the woods and you picked it up to show it to your kid and lifted the wings up, and and then maybe you'd be a little clumsy handling it, but ultimately,
well, it's even like when I take my kids fishing and they catch a fish. My son wants, Dad, can I throw it really far?
Yeah, and you
I'm
go, sure, why not?
Nah, be nice to the fish. You don't need to
I'm sorry. You say be nice to the fish. I say why not?
I say they're God's creatures. We treat them with respect. You're a bad guy. Oh, are you a Mason? Are you sacrificing?
I would have let my kid throw it into the water. And now I'm on record having said it.
So I forget where I was going with that, but except that
I wouldn't let him throw a whole bunch of them, just one. And then he would get a little carried away and I'd say, easy, let's start putting them back in. So just so we're clear.
I don't know. Do the fish have feelings? I think that came out at some point. Like we always said the hooks don't hurt, and they're they kind of hurt.
That sounds like a thing you would say if you were the one putting the hook in somebody's mouth.
So there's been a big push from a lot of leaders to just put that idea out there of this would bring world peace.
Yeah.
There's also been some push from just an economic, and I have another video clip. I feel so fancy bringing up the video clips.
Yeah, let them roll.
Clip 2. So this would be on CNN talking about how we might get our fiscal house in order through a faked alien invasion.
Get inflation in a depressed economy. But if you had a program of government spending plus an expansionary policy by the Fed, you could get that. So if you think about using all of these things together, you could accomplish a great deal. I mean, if we discovered that space aliens were planning to attack, and we needed a massive buildup to counter the space alien threat, and really inflation and budget deficits took secondary place to that, this slump would be over in 18 months. And then if we discovered, whoops, we made a mistake. There aren't actually any space aliens.
So we need Orson Welles, is what you're saying.
No, there was a Twilight Zone episode like this in which scientists fake an alien threat in order to achieve world peace. Well, this time we don't need it. We need it in order to get some fiscal stimulus.
Perhaps.
What say you about that, Dave?
I don't think that's too crazy. Wagging the dog to generate the economy. Stimulate it.
Yeah, there's people, they were going to blow up nukes on the moon, man. They were going to, like pretty normal people like us would think, oh my gosh, you can't lie about that. But there's people that think bigger than us.
Yeah.
And they realize, no, we gotta save the economy. Gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet kind of mentality.
There's an argument to be made of like, well, what would you rather have happen? Would you rather the economy imploded and it's just chaos, everybody's destitute, apocalypse? Or would you rather we just tell a little white lie and everybody feels good that they banded together for a little bit and we got some dollars moving around?
I've heard more people talk about the reason being world peace, one world governments, everybody just putting all their differences aside. I mean, I've heard a few people like that talking about the economic side of it. And it's, would the banks control the money? So if the banks needed something, I mean, they could afford it. And the ability to, like, could they even pull off a fake alien invasion? What would that even look like? And Corbett's podcast, they go into hologram technology that's existed since I think the 70s. So we do actually, we have the ability to project images of things into the sky that are completely fake. And they developed it for, it's a good military, tactic or tool, because if you're in battle, you could project that you're a fleet of fighter jets coming in, and maybe you're just one. But you just, they did that in World War II. They had, I think on Normandy, when they were throwing the Nazis off, they had a whole fleet of fake inflatable tanks.
Oh, no kidding.
That were put up on a beach. And so they were sending resources over there, and it was just like one guy blowing up tanks, blowing up inflatable tanks.
Inflating tanks.
So, I don't know if you found something on that, but just, like the technology does exist.
Let's see here. Yeah, I listened to that. That was interesting because you're right. That was 2015, and they're talking about this was like kind of obscure and tough for me to digest mentally, but holographs that you could touch,
Yeah.
But from what that little clip was sounding like is like the technology existed at the time, which was close to 10 years ago, of not only just visual holographs, but like physically you could touch these holographs, which is far more convincing, I would have thought.
And they also say, when you're talking about military R&D, it's like whatever you think right now the most high-tech piece of equipment is, put it about 20 to 30 years out from there.
Yeah.
So if you look at the top of the line Tesla or whatever you want to call it, that's blowing your mind with everything that it can do.
Yeah. Think about what's in development.
Oh yeah. They've got UFOs that can fly around. And so that's maybe, where we can pivot with this is, what do we think is going on? I don't know if you have an opinion about it. My opinion is military.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw UFO myself, and I'm like, I don't think the military's tracking me. I mean, maybe they are, but it seems like a waste of resources if you ask me. But I'm not that much of a narcissist that I would think that they're tracking me.
Have you heard that birds are drones conspiracy theory?
Yeah.
My brother brought that to my attention, which that's a good, funny one. But I sit out a lot of mornings and watch birds come in and land and fly off in my backyard. And yeah, that one I'm like, there's no way.
Have you ever seen that Rick and Morty episode where the squirrels are watching us? And it's called the Doolittle episode, I think. And Morty, for some reason, he can hear what the squirrels are saying to each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty funny because they're like, oh my God, he's onto us. He's onto us. We got a bogey. And they're like following him and he's like looking around.
Yeah. But to your point, I don't think that the government would be that interested in me that they would have like 7 or 8 drones in my backyard watching me sit there groggily drinking coffee.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's what got me. Well, I didn't think about it for a long time, except now I think both things could be true.
Yeah, that's almost.
And my
what
personal
I said.
theory, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to put a theory out here on Conspiracy Dad podcast is I think what we're seeing right now is I do think that the UFO phenomenon is a real phenomenon. I don't, Jimmy Carter agrees with me. So does Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. And I don't know if Trump has made a comment about it, but
if he saw a UFO, it was probably bigger and better.
There is a phenomenon that exists in our reality that we see UFOs that we don't know what it is, and it's also been around for a long time. I think it's not something that's, there's people that take it to the extreme where it's like, oh yeah, all the ancient stories of the gods, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know. All I know is it seems like there is a phenomenon that is not connected. I think that our military doesn't know what it is. Guys like Lou Elizondo, Tom DeLonge, all that effort to put this in the consciousness and bring it out. But what I think is happening now is I think that could simultaneously exist with now there are people using that. Like if you're in the military, this is your job or whatever, and you're like Lou Elizondo and you're put in charge of researching UFOs, and you do, and you realize we don't know what it is. It's not us. It's not the Chinese. It's not the Russians. People are seeing things. Commander Fravor saw a Tic Tac chasing his fighter jet, and you realize there's a phenomenon that exists and it's not us and it's not our enemies. Well, then you could fake an alien invasion, you know what I mean? And you know that other people know that that's a phenomenon, and you could use that. And that's my fear of what might happen is like, yeah, you could, who am I to say if something lands on the White House lawn tomorrow to say that's fake. I've seen them. They don't look like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. What would we say?
Well, I don't know. What would you need to see for it to be believable? Like, would it be footage of it landing on the White House lawn, or?
Well, what I'm saying is, if it landed, it's very likely that could be just us.
Yeah. No, I guess what I'm saying
actually
is
real.
Just as you were talking about it, the question came to mind of like, what would that look like to you if you were like, "Boy, that looks like aliens for real invading"?
Yeah, I guess. God, it's a tough one. I
don't have an answer.
I think we're coming to a place where you can't make a real informed opinion because it's so easy to fake things. There's so much fake footage out there. I believe what I see with my own eyes, but even what I've seen, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's alien. I'm not saying it's us. I don't know. I don't know what it is. And I think that might be by design. That's exactly the environment you would want.
Yeah.
If you were going to fake an alien invasion, you create enough, you muddy the waters enough with conspiracies and weirdness and whatever that even when something legitimate or not legitimate happens, who's to say?
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly where we are. I mean, that'd be my thesis. I don't know what you think.
For some reason that storming the Capitol just keeps coming to mind. And with the idea that I've heard some comments that I don't know if there's an FBI operative involved in that was like getting these guys riled up
I think
to
there was.
get in
Yeah.
to the Capitol.
They've identified him. I forget his name, but
that's what I thought.
he is a Fed.
Yeah. I'm not informed about it enough to really say, but yeah, it sounded like similar to like the accounts of Black Panthers or FBI infiltrating Black Panthers, decades ago, where it's like there's already a little bit of kindling kicking up and there's some heat, and then the FBI comes in and like stokes the fire and really makes a problem to where the general public kind of goes, oh gosh,
we're just so easily manipulated. Yeah. It's dicey times in that regard because, the idea that you could fake an alien invasion absolutely could happen. There's definitely a motive or, an incentive to do this. And we don't have, I wrote in one of the songs that we do, the crazy song is the point of it is when everything's coming through a screen. Yeah. Everything we know is coming through a screen. Which and like I said a long time ago, the internet is a military operation. It always has been. It is. And you think, well, what is going on? I don't know. I know what I saw with my own eyes and the context of it. That was weird. Mm-hmm. And I guess there's some reassurance there that I don't think that the military was spying on me. I think that I saw a phenomenon, something strange that we don't know what it is, which maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's how it's going to play out. But I'm afraid that I see what's happening now is the weaponization of the UFO phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'd kind of think it's a bad thing. I would say.
I kind of think so too.
I'm kind of really big on. I'm anti-military industrial complex. Yeah. At this point, I'm like, scale back, guys.
My goodness, yeah. It's been the trend ever since Eisenhower of military industrial complex benefiting from us being in conflicts throughout the world. And then, gosh, we would pay through the nose to make sure we had something to defend us from aliens.
We already have.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You see that clip of, was it Cheney the day before 9/11 saying $4 trillion is missing from the defense budget and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And then the next day a plane flies into the defense budget office. This is all news to you.
Yeah.
Go listen to James Corbett. He'll explain it to you. But the question of, are there trillions of dollars missing from our defense budget? Yes.
It's a weird thing to be missing.
The estimates I've heard is anywhere from $2 to $22 trillion. And so you got to wonder, well, if I had $1 trillion, could I fake an alien invasion? I think so,
yeah.
If I had $20 trillion, could I fake an alien invasion? Pretty easily.
Yeah.
I could have bases on the moon. I could be flying to Mars and back, I think. $20 trillion missing?
That sounds like a lot of trillions.
It's a lot of trillions. Yeah. 22, I think, last I heard. So, I hate to end on a negative note. I hate to be a downer.
We're all hosed.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a crazy idea. And I wouldn't have taken any of this seriously 6-7 years ago.
I wouldn't have taken it seriously
6-7
months ago. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. That's how quickly it can happen.
Yeah. And I think it's a mistake to pretend like I know something that I don't actually know.
Uh-huh.
I feel like it's our job to just poke holes in things that look shady, 3-letter agency things, and just say, it doesn't make sense. I'm not claiming I know what's going on. I just know that there's trillions of dollars missing from the defense budget.
It's bizarre in the same way that the NASA files from the Apollo 11 landing are missing. Like, I don't understand how that could go missing. I have a receipt.
Tom DeLonge's take on it when he was on Joe Rogan was, well, everyone's, he said it was by design. He's like, oh yeah, they, something about like everyone's been arguing about whether or not we landed on the moon. They don't stop long enough to go, well, what did we find on the moon? And
some people bring that up, but yeah.
Yeah, I think he's of the opinion that the reason that the footage that we see is fake and looks fake is because they couldn't show us the real footage for some reason. And back to my point about those Russian cosmonauts talking about our impossible moon, maybe is something on the moon that we don't. I'm not claiming I know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like that's an interesting conspiracy theory. Like, get them all excited talking about fake lunar landings at the same time.
Yeah.
We lost that footage.
That must be
it's because
where,
you faked it. It's like, no, it's because you can't see the alien base that we found on the moon.
That must be where while we're talking about this, I thought, I've heard this idea before where they plant an idea somewhere inside a conspiracy theory to kind of take your eye off the ball of
There's a word for that, isn't there? It's like sheep dipped or something. I can't remember.
It's a cool phrase.
It's a military term. I'm trying to remember exactly what it means. I found a scotch called sheep dipped once and I had to buy it. And I was like, that's pretty cool. But, are they faking an alien invasion? It sounds like a stupid question. It sounds ridiculous, but I would put to the world that we should be paying attention to that question right now.
Aware that it's at least a possibility.
Well, I mean, it's what a lot of military and government people are talking about. The idea, and this is, disclosure of this, is I don't know if they're ever going to disclose what's going on, but I don't know. How are we going to respond when there is some crazy claim that like aliens are visiting Earth? You look at Paul Hellyer. I was talking to a Canadian buddy of mine the other day, and he knew all about Paul Hellyer. And I was like, yeah, he's former Minister of Defense of Canada. If you've never looked him up, do look him up. There's people like him that are high ranking that make he believes that there's multiple races of aliens that have been visiting Earth, that we have an alliance with them. He used taxpayer money to make a landing pad in Canada for UFOs. There's the former head of the Israeli space program. You can look up about a year ago. He came out and said the same thing, that there's a galactic federation of 7 different races of aliens that have been visiting Earth for many, many years. And we've had an agreements with them. And it's far out there stuff. It's not like, oh, we saw something. It's like, oh no, they're running the show. Like Hillary Clinton's a reptilian kind of stuff. But they could just be crazy. Are you looking at Paul Hellyer?
Both, yeah. I found the first alien landing pad pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My Canadian buddy knew all about it. He's like, oh, yeah, he's a big deal in Canada.
Yeah, looks like in St. Paul, Canada, maybe. That may not be it. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. That former Israeli space program guy.
Yeah.
He again, it's not just like we saw a UFO. They've been with us for a long time.
Yeah,
we have agreements with them.
I've heard those accounts of nuclear bases being shut down.
Yeah,
like
Maelstrom.
We were about to turn the keys, and then all of a sudden everything got turned off.
And that's not that was about a year ago. There were several different nuclear facility operators who came forward and said different accounts of things like that, like that UFOs were hovering over, that missile programs that were not connected were being manipulated with. And I've heard Russians claim the same thing.
Which, that would be good news. If the aliens are keeping us from firing nukes at each other, that leads me to believe that they're much more benign.
Well, it's not exactly.
Yeah?
Because there's other people like Tom DeLonge talking about it. He according to his CIA sources were, and I think Lou Elizondo talked about it too, is that no, they were arming the Russian nukes.
Oh.
And that there were Russians that knew it wasn't us and they turned them off.
Oh, okay.
So I think Lou is on record saying something like there are heroes over there that
I've heard
knew
that
this was not a panic button moment.
It's a lot of discernment. Thanks,
Russia.
Russia.
Tom's interpretation, again, you want to go back. He's a crazy rock star, but he was saying, it's a little unsettling. in that Joe Rogan interview. He said there's like when he was kind of told what was going on.
I can't wait to listen back to that.
These Pentagon officials, he said he didn't sleep for 3 days. He said it's a little unnerving, but he also implies that it's not what we think it is. Like that we think it's little green men from another planet. And he's like, it's more like, he's alluded to it's basically interdimensional. It's not always here. It's multiverse stuff, like crossing over. I don't know.
It's never what you think it is.
I mean, if it's true, then a multiverse was crossing over my house back in 2020 on Halloween.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sticking with us. Let us know what you guys think of the concept of a faked alien invasion. Is that all that's going on? Is that not going on? Is the phenomenon real? Is it not real? I think that it's thankfully a subject that never gets exhausted. And so part of me really hopes that they never land on the White House lawn, because then I won't have much to talk about.
Yeah, right. They'll really do it one day and you'll be like, well, I guess that's the end of the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I guess we could just start interpreting what they're saying to us or telling us to do.
Yeah. Well, if they speak telepathically, like Barney Hill says that they do, there's not going to be a lot of interpreting needed being done.
Yeah. Well, very good. Thank you for joining us, guys. Please like, subscribe, and share if you're a fan. We appreciate you so much, and we will see you next time.